Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts and creators, Bryent. Normally, I am joined by my co-creator, Cami, but she isn't here because we've been busy, and it's been about a year since we last recorded anything. But I have been motivated to record a solo episode. I've done, I think, at least one, and with Cami's blessing, I'm here. And what motivated me for this is because I just celebrated my 32nd birthday. And if you're like me, you think, oh, I'm 32. That's when Alexander the Great died. And so I have a lot to get done this year because Alexander the Great did a lot. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Alexander the Great, starting with the siege of Tyre and its famous conclusion. Because normally we give Cami would normally lead with a nice story, and then I would give the history. But since she's not here, the onus is on me. And the siege of Tyre is really interesting because Tyre was one of the main Phoenician cities. So, when we think of Alexander the Great of Macedon, Macedon was north of Greece, if I'm thinking of the map right, and had Greek. They spoke like Greek language. They had Greek culture. They were kind of seen down by the major players like Sparta and Athens, but who wasn't by them. And Phoenicians, the Phoenician culture had its own kind of set of city states. They didn't quite like hit the Greek level, like the Hellenization, which was brought in by Alexander. But regardless, Tyre was probably the top city. It was a naval superpower, and it was huge. And it was a roadblock for Alexander because he wanted to keep conquering Persians because he'd been doing that since he was like 15, and he wanted to keep on knocking them back. And the Phoenicians' naval capacity could prevent that, and also could be an asset for him. So he started in 332 BC. He was trying to take down Tyre, and he just couldn't. It's a lone island. It was too well guarded. Their defenses were too good, and their navy was too good. So he did what any other person would do, and he decided to make his own bridge, but not like just a bridge, like a landmass. Like he constructed a landmass from the coast to the island itself. And through time, many months, like most sieges take, he was able to take them out. So he apparently, and obviously, the Tyrians weren't just going to like stand in awe as he like created a landmass to them. So they did fiercely resist, but Alexander apparently ordered the construction of two massive siege towers, which would fire catapults and archers. He deployed divers to sabotage the Tyrian defenses. So this was like a all-out World War I, II level stuff going on here, and it makes sense. Tyre was a huge city. This would be kind of like taking on Sparta if Alexander wanted to. So it was really interesting. But they completed the causeway, and with the help of allied Phoenician cities, he eventually was able to. Well, he breached the walls and allegedly led the charge, which was something that Alexander was known for doing. And they moved in, and apparently he ordered the crucifixion of 2,000 Tyrian citizens, and the rest were sold into slavery because that's just how it goes back then. And lo and behold, he had the city of Tyre. And this was huge. I remember hearing about this because there's memes about like, making a land bridge just because you're Alexander the Great and you have all the resources in the world. But I wondered, why do that? Why is it such a big deal? And it really was. And I think it exemplifies, Alexander had been conquering for basically half of his life at this point, but it really exemplifies the effect of it. And I wanted to study what the effects of this were. And scholarly sources say that it took out the biggest Phoenician city, which caused a power vacuum, and it was the example. And so all the other cities, the Phoenician cities, they like Byblos and things like that. They just they were like, nope, we're good. We are subjugated under you, and they followed what a lot of people did. And that was something else I used to think about a lot. Like, did Alexander really conquer? Like, what is it? How do you define conquering? Do you have to decimate them? Do you have to subjugate them? Do you subjugate them just by fear or what? And, I think of the Vikings and the Mongols and how they did similar things. They were people who were seen lesser, but were stronger physically, and just they were able to take political and strength advantage of a situation and take over the superior culture or civilization or whatever it was. And so I'm sure there's more that's more scholarly kind of takes you can take on that, but at least in the case of Tyre, he conquered it. Yeah, he did. He straight up he decimated it and annihilated it, and it was a huge deal. And he, like he did in many ways, he sort of integrated it and he replaced it with a what would soon kind of be normally or the norm of Hellenizing it, which sort of had an effect on Phoenician culture too, and made it more Greek or Hellenized. So I didn't know too much about Philip II, his dad, and it's really important because he's Alexander's not exactly like a rags to riches. He's a riches to immortalization kind of guy. And his father's really important because he really set up Alexander. And Alexander, I think, if we take history for what it is, he didn't squander whatever his dad gave him. And so this dynasty in Macedon is called the Argead dynasty. It's very old, and this area was it was pretty common to what you might think. They were a bunch of tribes, and they were kind of banded together as the Argead dynasty. And just like everybody does, they specifically and very strongly claimed descent from Hercules. But I think everybody does at this point. I think everybody can. But it was ruled by kings with a strong central authority. So that's one thing that it really differed from the other Greek city-states that were going with the democracies and the oligarchies and things like that. This one was pretty much like, nope, there's a head honcho and he calls the shots. And that's what Philip II was able to really kind of do. So the Argead dynasty around the 7th century BC was what took the throne around Macedon. But in the 4th century BC, that's when King Philip II, Alexander's father, was able to really take over. He was a cunning politician. He was really smart. And he played the Greek city-states against each other, expanded the Macedonian influence through not just conquest, but diplomacy. The biggest thing was forming the League of Corinth in 337. And this was huge because it basically it was a way to conquer the Greeks, but make them feel like they weren't being conquered. And so it allowed some like autonomy, but they had to recognize Macedon as like the main hegemon. And there was a common goal of uniting culturally similar peoples. We can kind of just throw out the term the Greeks against the Persian Empire. And this is important. Some of Alexander's first victories were against the Persians and were against Persian-controlled Greek city-states. So it was kind of like a reclaiming and things like that. So, but Alexander just really pressed it and pushed it and took Persia from Darius, the king of Persia at the time, and went farther than anybody else had. So, yeah, with the League of Corinth, when Alexander inherited the throne, he got the combined forces, and yeah, it's not that hard to convince the League of Corinth to take these city-states back. They're Greek-speaking, they're under Persian domain. You don't want the Persians to get stronger, so you keep it going. Alexander did still face resistance and rebellions. There were many who resented Macedonian control. Again, I don't know how much it really played into things then, but a lot of the city-states sort of saw the Macedonians as, I don't know if barbaric's the right term, but like lesser for sure. And it was really interesting. But the Macedonian culture was they spoke Greek of that time. They had Greek customs. They shared gods. So it was very, very similar in a lot of ways. And when Alexander was able to take over, he just had this ambition and vision and the resources, and he just used it, and he moved through and took over. He had his biggest sieges. There was like 15 big ones or big steps that I sort of saw. And he starts in, Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. And then he died in Babylon, but he went through modern day southern Iran and Pakistan, after going through India, after going through Mesopotamia and controlling it. it was just interesting. And I know Cami and I have talked about in the past. I think when we talked about Hercules, you can see Greek imagery, like kind of the Greek like god poses of like Hercules in, I believe it's Hindu temples, or temples in the Asia, in like the, I guess that'd be the East Asian, East Asian, West Asian, South Asian area. The path that Alexander took into India. He Hellenized it a lot, but it was a lot of integration too. And Alexander, he liked, the Romans and the Greeks liked old gods, like Egyptian and all that. They were like down, like, yeah, they can join we can talk about them too. And so you can see that influence quite literally being infused in the culture and the importance of it. But the whole point of this episode is that he died, and he was 32 when he died, which is kind of wild. Now, before I kind of round out and end this, I do like to talk about some of the big sources, and I mainly talk about the primary sources, which not many contemporaries survived. So the oldest is Diodorus Siculus of the 1st century BCE, and everyone else is 1st and 2nd century CE. Arrian, Plutarch, Quintus Curtius Rufus. We've talked about them on the show before, and if you're a history buff, you might have heard of them as well. These were Greek and one Roman historians who made either compendium like histories of just the world in general, but Quintus Curtius Rufus wrote the Historiae Alexandri Magni. This was specifically about Alexander's reign, and was a little embellished. It seems like, and likely was, but no doubt that these historians all derived from works that are lost to us that were available to them. And yeah, I mean, Julius Caesar called upon Alexander the Great. Napoleon called upon Alexander the Great. And not many rulers get the Great added to it. There's like 5, like Catherine, Alfred, and then a few others. So it's an epithet that's pretty important. And when I was turning 32, I wasn't like kind of lamenting at what I hadn't done. I hadn't conquered India. I don't plan on it, but I have accomplished a lot, and it's just interesting to think about where I am in my life right now is where Alexander was, except he was dying in Babylon in a few months. So I'll let you know if I go out of the country. But I just, it's nice because it's the whole point of why Cami and I started the show some 5 years ago. Wow. It's because of thinking, just connecting, thinking, diving deeper, and relating. And whenever we talk about anything from the Mabinogian Welsh mythology to Japanese creation myth, I don't know, something in me feels connected to all of it and can relate to it. And I'm just thankful to have the platform. And so Cami and I do plan on coming back and doing more episodes. She's been incredibly busy, and she is incredible. She has her own store, still working another job, and she's just amazing. And I can't wait to do more with her again here. But I just kind of wanted to get this out as a little primer. I've moved. I have a different setup, but we're going to work out some of the technical kinks and maybe even do face-to-face recordings again like we did a long time ago, but it'll sound good this time. But thank you for joining Mythstorie here. If you have any suggestions for what we should talk about, we love getting especially off-the-wall suggestions and uncommon ones, even if it's something Greek or Roman that's just severely overlooked. I hope that today you learned something and that you thought of the world and related to the world a little more differently. And please, like and subscribe, help revive our channel, which if you're a longtime follower, you'll learn one thing that helped demotivate Cami and I was, I can't remember his name, an Irish comedian with a big following. He started his own like sub podcast called Mythstories, spelled the same way, just with an S built in. And that kind of deflated us because he had like 50,000 views in the bucket, like in the morning that he published an episode. And it was, a little disheartening, but he looks like he's gone. So we can creep back from under our battered bodies and start doing more of these episodes again. So, as always, thanks for joining us. Let us know what you think. And hopefully next time you will see myself and Cami, my permanent guest and co-creator of Mythstorie. Thank you so much.